Welcome back, where we are working on my 59 Galaxie again. So this will be the third episode, I think, assuming this comes out in order, of working on this thing. Last episode, we worked a lot on the inside. We got all the patch panels done and painted the inside, so it looks really nice now. And this time, it's working on the front end. While the engine's out, all this stuff is super easy to get to, so one of the first things we're going to do is paint everything so it looks nice, and also while we're at it, we're going to paint in new bushings and new shocks, and even those might get replaced, because we actually are putting in new parts. We do have a new master cylinder, we have new shocks, stuff like that, but we're just going to wire wheel all this, hose everything down, and then start replacing the stuff that we need to replace, and get this looking nice and, like I said, fully restored with new bushings that were, Rust-Oleum branded. With that being said, Adam's here. We're going to both take a couple wire wheels, and we're going to start getting all this stuff ready for paint.
Remove exhaust. Check.
just saw us finish painting the front end of the firewall. It's had time to dry, and I think everyone can agree that it looks so much better, and at the very least, far less derelict and abandoned. Maybe even borderline nice. Take that for what it's worth. Um, but if you're wondering why we did all that work before we actually started working on the front end, it just means that there's less stuff we have to paint around. We're doing stuff like replacing the master cylinder, so the new one I'd have to tape off and mask off and paint around. This one I can just paint right over, and I don't care because it's getting replaced. Same thing with the fuel lines. I don't trust the fuel lines at all. This thing was in a flood. Remember, it was underwater. So rather than try and clean out the fuel lines and deal with that, I've got brand new hard lines and brand new soft lines. We're just going to replace it all. So the first step in putting new stuff on is getting rid of the old stuff. One of the things we're getting rid of is the exhaust that's literally held in with baling wire. No joke, that's literally all that's holding it in. And get that out of the way, then we can start working on running new fuel lines and kind of taking scope of what all is good and what's bad. So, with all that out of the way, let's get started tearing some of this stuff out. There we have piece number one, held in by this little guy. He's seen better days. Good world's quickest exhaust removal right there. More baling wire. Alright, well, that is the exhaust removed. Kind of cool. Glass packs. 1 point had chrome tips. That means it's got gypsum tips. Shout out Vice Grip Garage. Although they may not count as tips, considering there's really nothing left. But they were there. I think we should count it. Well, the exhaust is out of the way, so the next thing I said that we're going to tackle is a fuel line. So, that's what we're going to do next. You might be wondering why. Well, you got to remember this thing was on a flood. So, it was completely underwater, submerged up to like here-ish, or something, so I've heard. And while this side of the line is capped off, the other side of the line isn't. I don't know why you cap one side off and not the other, but without a gas tank in the back because there's no gas tank. It's just an open line. So we're gonna start taking this hard line off. We've got brand new line to replace it, and one thing we're going to do is we're going to try and recreate the same routing if we like it. If not, we can do whatever we want. So we'll kind of take creative liberty if we need to. But assuming that the routing is pretty good, that's the same routing that we're going to use with the new stuff. So shockingly, the side that was underneath the rubber part of this actually looks pretty good. The rest of the line does not. But you can see if I take this off, the little bolt that was supposed to be a cap, it's all rusted, which means they got a lot of water in here. So, yeah. Don't know what the bolt went to. Probably find out at some point, but in addition to the rubber line being super crunchy, I'm still not going to screw with any of this. It's just not worth it. It's a gasoline water mix. Cool. At least I didn't cut with something that's making sparks. Without setting anything on fire. It's a good thing there's not smell-o-vision, because, oh god, that's bad. It looked good up here. There's sections of it that look good, and there's other sections that look absolutely terrible. And if you go all throughout the inside of it, there's just that. So that is sand and dirt and clearly a little bit of varnish. So yeah, I felt a little bad about cutting the lines up here. The further back I got, I no longer felt guilty at all. This was unfortunate, but the smart thing to do, because we would have been fighting this, clogging up filters, clogging up the carb, may not even be, flow. It just would have been a mess. Well, now that we have the exhaust out of the way and the fuel line out of the way, unfortunately it looks like the next thing is we're going to have to pull the rear brake line. It's not hooked up to anything. There's no soft line going to the axle, and there's actually no brake lines on the axle at all. Well, unfortunately, that means that we're probably going to have to pull the rear line. And I don't know when that was disconnected. Looking at different things on the fuel line, it was probably disconnected when the car was underwater. I'm guessing the brake line was also disconnected when this car was underwater, which means it's probably full of all sorts of gunk. The last thing I want to deal with is replacing the rear wheel cylinders, only to have them get clogged up with all sorts of gunk and other stuff that was on the line for something that, when there's no engine, no transmission, or anything else, is much, much easier to replace. So that's what we're unfortunately going to do. We're going to pull the rear brake line. We're going to try and plug the distribution block so we minimize the number of issues that we're going to have, and get that out of the way. We have one thing going for us, which is this union right here. That means that there's a small possibility that this front part of the brake line, this part, that part, is actually still good and clean, and that we just have to replace the backpack going that way. Pretty small likelihood since this whole car was underwater, which is more evident by the fact that the fitting that is on the back part of the brake line is rusted to the brake line, with nothing actually screwed into it, or it's not screwed into anything. Yeah, that was very watery brake fluid. So unfortunately, it looks like we're going to be better off replacing all the brake line. This section actually looks decently clean, but running out with the fluid that was still left in it was a bunch of rust and sand and just other gunk. So at this point, it's pretty safe to say that at least this whole lower fuel line is just kind of complete junk. We could probably clean it out, but for trying to prevent future problems, I think it's better off that we just replace it all. It's only a few feet that we would be saving anyways. So in the interest of, like I said, preventing future issues, we're just gonna yank all this crap out and start over again. Well, the timeline for working on the Galaxie hasn't completely gone according to plan. Ended up with another old Ford that was making a mess all over my shop. Here's a picture of it. It's actually kind of cool. We're back working on the Galaxie though. In the intro, because I'm not reshooting it, I said that I was going to get new parts on this car by the end of this episode, and you know what? I'm trying, so it's not going to be much. But we are going to start working on making new rear brake lines. That's going to be the new parts. Is we've got a new soft line, and we've got new hard line and fittings, and we're going to start here and go all the way back to where the soft line is. We're also going to actually work in a little bit of technology. or more used technology to make something, which is we're going to use 3D printed mounts to hold the brake line and eventually the fuel line to the frame rail. So that's the plan for today, and let's get started working on this new brake line. So here are these brackets I was telling you about. They're 3D printed. They're two different pieces, clamped together, 3/8 fuel line, 3/16 brake line, fit together, held in place with a button head Allen head bolt. So we're gonna drill and tap into the frame rail, thread this in, put a little bit of anti-seize on it, and it should hold it nice and secure without actually like crushing the tube, which is exactly what we want. Gonna be doing all our own flares. Know exactly what size fitting, and got a cheap tubing straightener off of Amazon. So hopefully this is everything that we need, along with a Jegs tubing bender, to get this brake line done. So had this line capped just after I took the brake lines out, so hopefully that keeps it nice and clean. Set that guy right up there so we can find it later. Probably not. No, it's already lost forever. What cap? I don't know what you're talking about. So the plan is to go right where the steering arm is. So we're going to put another bend right about here. That's where I want that bend. So it goes straight down, stays out of the way of the steering arm, and doesn't get pinched between it and the frame rail. So we want to go right about here. And then we're going to run underneath the frame till we get right about here-ish, somewhere back there. And then we're going to pop out, put the first mount in, as long as we are clear of the transmission mount, and run on back. Well, we've gotten this far. This is about the line. This is about where we're going to run the line. Now, see this bolt right here? This 4-bolt pattern is the transmission mount. And I think by the time we get down to here, frame's pretty much at full level. However, if here, it's still angling up. So if we put a 90 here, 90 up here, we could actually run above and then drop down below on the side of the frame where we actually want to be and run that all the way back. That might protect it a little bit better. There shouldn't be anything in the way over here. So that's what we're going to try and do just to give it as much protection as possible. I don't think we're going to run into any issues anyways, but, you know, just try and be kind of sort of careful occasionally. Again, still trying to do this in one piece. It would be way easier in two, but, you know, glutton for punishment. One is just so much better and cleaner, and there's no other joints to leak. there we go. There's our first mount. I actually really like the way this turned out. Looks pretty nice and clean. Does a nice good job. Like I said, it's not going anywhere. Really? Yeah, I just did that. It's really nice and secure. It's not going to be moving around a lot. So now we can keep on moving backwards. Well, we're putting in the next mount, going to be right here. We're actually going to mount the brake line on the upper half so we can run the fuel line on the bottom half. And now I'm doing this with a crescent wrench because my tap handle broke. So, go me. Well, here's the new brake line. Just got to put this little C-clip in. That'll hold it in place. Then we'll know exactly where we need to cut this brake line. Kill the spider that's crawling. Boom. Well, that's it for this episode. I was hoping to do more, but the way things kind of played out, I was able to at least get new parts, so I didn't lie at the intro to this video. If you want to keep following along, I'm gonna keep posting videos, so feel free to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. They're not gonna be super scheduled, so just giving you guys a little bit of a notice on that. Unless Adam's out here working, it's all me, including doing all the editing and everything else. So have a little leniency for it, since it's just me. But already looking forward to next episode. It's either going to be starting to install the new fuel system, or at least the tank and maybe part of the line, or it's going to be tearing this front end and seeing what other parts I need to buy that I didn't know about. That seems to be a common thing. But either way, super excited. So until next time, I'll see you later.